My wife cheated with her boss, and now she's claiming half my $300, $0 inheritance in the family home. Everything I worked for is slipping away in a bitter legal battle. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to find out my wife was cheating on me through a series of random, almost unbelievable events. You know those moments where everything just falls apart in an instant? Yeah, that was me. It started with small things, little signs that I brushed off at first. Sarah, my wife, had been acting distant, more secretive about her phone, and she started working late more often. She'd come home exhausted, her lipstick smudged sometimes, and her stories about her boss, Mark, just didn't add up. I remember one night catching her in a lie about a dinner with clients, and her tone was defensive, bitchy even when I pressed her about it. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I loved her and I told myself maybe it was just work stress or she was overworked. Besides, she always had a way of spinning her stories, making herself look innocent. That's what she was good at, lying, twisting things around to make herself look like the victim. I was used to her manipulative ways, but I never imagined it would come to this. Then one day I found her phone lying on the kitchen table, open to a message thread from Mark. It was explicit. Not just a flirt, but outright sex talk, plans to meet up, even pictures. I froze. My stomach dropped and I felt like my world was tilting. I stared at the screen, reading her words. How excited she was to see him, how she couldn't wait to get away from me, to have a secret life that she kept hidden from everyone. The worst part, she lied about everything, saying she and Mark were just colleagues, nothing more. She insisted she loved me, that I was overreacting, but I knew better. I could feel it in my gut. That day I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started digging, going through her emails, her social media, even her hidden apps. It was like peeling back layers of a lie she'd carefully built. I found more than just flirtation. I found plans to meet up, even a hotel reservation she'd made under a fake name. That was the moment I realized I was in deep. She'd been cheating on me for months, maybe longer, and I had no idea. The betrayal hit me like a punch in the stomach. I'd worked so hard to build a life, our house, the inheritance I was supposed to get, everything I'd saved up for. And now I felt like I was losing it all just because she decided to cheat and lie her way through our marriage. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the couch, staring at her terrible, innocent face in the photos I'd saved, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and a brutal sense of betrayal. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure what I'd say or how I'd handle it. I just knew that everything I thought was real was crumbling right in front of me. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding head and a stomach full of knots. I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what I'd seen. That day, I decided I had to confront Sarah. I didn't want to do it in a heated rage, but I also couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed answers, truth, no matter how ugly. I called her at work, and when she answered, her voice sounded strained, like she'd been crying or maybe just exhausted from lying so much. I told her I needed to talk, and she hesitated, then agreed to come home early. When she finally walked through the door that evening, I could see she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. That made me angrier. I didn't say much at first. I just looked at her, waiting for her to speak. She tried to act innocent, that bitchy tone creeping back into her voice. "What's this about, Jason? You're acting like I've committed some crime." I didn't hold back. I laid all the evidence out on the table, her messages, the hotel reservation, the photos. I watched her face twist into a mixture of shock, denial, and anger. She kept insisting she didn't mean for it to happen, that Mark was just a fling, a mistake. She even had the nerve to say, "You're overreacting. This doesn't mean anything. You're just jealous, Jason. Maybe you're the one who's been distant lately." I couldn't believe her lies. I told her she was full of shit, that I'd seen enough to know she'd been cheating on me for months. I told her I felt like I'd been living with a stranger, someone I barely recognized. Her face turned into a sneer. "You're acting like I cheated on you with some random guy. Mark's my boss, and he's been supportive. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of being so damn paranoid, this wouldn't have happened." That was her big excuse. She made it sound like it was all my fault, like I was the reason she strayed. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying from the start. She always did, twisting stories, blaming me for everything. I felt my blood boiling. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and tell her how much she destroyed everything we built. Instead, I just stared, trying to hold it all together. The emotional was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I'd poured so much into this marriage, our home, my inheritance, my savings, and now I was watching it all slip away because she was too selfish to stop her affair. The worst part, she kept insisting she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt me. Yeah, right, I'd heard that before. She was a master at lying and pretending she was the victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I needed some time to think. I excused myself and went to the garage, where I sat in my car trying to process everything. I knew I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. I had to decide what to do next. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I had worked so hard to secure my future, my inheritance, the house, everything I wanted to pass down to my kids someday. And now I was looking at a legal battle that could tear everything apart. I never imagined I'd be here, facing the possibility of losing everything because of her lies and betrayal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her sneers, the way she tried to justify her cheating. I realized I'd been blind for too long, giving her the benefit of the doubt, thinking she'd change, that she loved me enough to stop. But she didn't, and now I was left with the wreckage. I knew I had to plan my next move carefully. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about protecting what was mine, my home, my inheritance, my dignity. She crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she paid for it, one way or another. In the days that followed, everything happened so fast I hardly had time to breathe. I was caught between shock, rage, and a cold, calculating sense of resolve. I started digging into her finances, her bank accounts, her emails, her phone records. I needed to understand exactly how deep she'd gone, how much she was trying to take from me. Turns out, she'd already begun making moves to claim half my inheritance, claiming I was unfit to handle the money because I was emotionally unstable after discovering her affair. That woman was a master manipulator, spinning her lies with ease. I found out through some sneaky online searches that she'd been talking to lawyers, talking about splitting everything, our family home, my inheritance, even claiming she deserved a chunk of it because she was my wife. That's when I realized she was planning to pull some legal stunt if I didn't act fast. I also uncovered that she'd been secretly meeting with her lawyer, preparing to fight me over everything I'd worked for. That was the moment I knew I had to do something drastic. I called my own lawyer, a guy I'd used before, and explained everything. I told him I needed to prepare for a fight, because Sarah was clearly trying to cheat me out of my inheritance and the house, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. My lawyer told me I had a solid case to protect my assets, especially since I had the inheritance papers and proof I was the rightful owner. But he warned me it wouldn't be easy. Sarah had a way of twisting facts, and she was already rallying her own legal team to make her case. Meanwhile, I started to formulate a plan. I knew I had to hit back hard, not just with legal firepower but also with some strategic moves of my own. I decided to gather all the evidence I could, texts, emails, financial records, that proved she was trying to steal everything. I also began secretly recording conversations, just in case I needed to prove her intentions in court. It was dirty, but I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything. I also contacted a private investigator to see if I could get any additional proof of her ongoing affair with Mark, because I knew that if I could expose that, it would devastate her legal case and maybe even turn the tide in my favor. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I'd worked so hard to build my life, and now I was fighting to keep what was legally mine. I had to stay calm, keep my composure, and plan every move carefully. I knew Sarah was cunning, and she'd do anything to get her hands on my inheritance. She'd lie, manipulate, even threaten if she had to. But I was determined not to let her take what I'd earned. My thoughts kept circling around her lies, her manipulations, and how she'd convinced herself she was entitled to a share of everything just because she was my wife. One night, I found myself sitting in front of my computer, poring over all the evidence I'd collected, trying to piece together her next move. I realized she was trying to play the victim, claiming I was abusive, unstable, anything to turn the court's sympathy in her favor. But I knew the truth. I'd never raised my voice at her, never hit her, never did anything remotely abusive. I was just a guy who loved his wife and thought we had a future. Now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman willing to destroy everything for her own benefit. That realization only fueled my resolve. I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to protect what was mine, no matter what it took. I started drafting my formal response to her lawyer, outlining my claims, my evidence, and my intentions. I knew this was going to get ugly, but I was ready. I couldn't let her steal my inheritance, my home, and my dignity. I had spent years building this life, and I was determined to keep it. The fight was just beginning, and I knew I had to stay sharp, stay focused, and be prepared for whatever she threw at me next. The legal battle was like nothing I'd ever expected. Sarah, with her bitchy attitude and endless lies, was relentless. She hired her own lawyer, some slick, aggressive guy who seemed more interested in dragging things out than actually resolving anything. She played the victim, crying to friends and even to her lawyer, claiming I was emotionally abusive, unstable, and that I'd been neglecting her. She spun stories about how she felt trapped and had no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. I couldn't believe her audacity, but I knew better than to get caught up in her emotional manipulation. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence, every email, every text, every conversation I could find. I had to be meticulous because I knew she'd do everything in her power to twist the facts. I also made sure to document her every move, every late-night meeting, every suspicious call. I was determined to expose her lies, and I wasn't going to let her get away with claiming I was the bad guy. I also secretly recorded some of her conversations, especially the ones where she was talking about her lawyer's advice and her plans to claim half my inheritance. One of the most shocking moments came when I caught her trying to transfer a large sum of money from our joint account, an attempt to hide assets or perhaps to prepare for her legal claims. I immediately flagged it with my bank, and that gave me even more ammunition. I knew she was planning something, but I also realized I had to act fast. If I didn't stop her, she might succeed in taking half of everything I'd worked for. I also contacted a forensic accountant to audit our finances, just to make sure there weren't any other surprises waiting for me. The emotional toll was intense. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. I could see her bitchy smirk when she thought I wasn't looking, and I knew she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She'd tell friends I was unstable, that I was trying to control her, just to sway public opinion. But I kept my head down, focused on the facts. I knew that if I let her spin her lies, I'd lose everything: my home, my inheritance, my dignity. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and protecting what I'd earned. One night, I was sitting in my living room, staring at the legal papers I'd prepared, when I decided I could keep going blindly. I reached out to my lawyer and told him I wanted to file for a temporary restraining order, something to keep her from selling or transferring assets until the case was settled. It was a risky move, but I had to act fast. I couldn't let her drain our accounts or hide away the house. The lawyer agreed, and we moved quickly to get the court to impose restrictions. That was a turning point. It was the first real step I took to push back against her schemes. I knew she'd be furious, but I didn't care. She'd already crossed too many lines, and I was done playing nice. The fight was about to get even uglier, and I was ready for it. I'd spent years building my life, and I wasn't about to let her destroy it just because she got bored or wanted more. I was determined to win this legal war, one way or another. This was about more than money now. It was about respect, dignity, and making sure she didn't walk all over me. The court date finally arrived, and I was ready. I had all my evidence organized: emails, bank statements, the recordings, everything. That proved Sarah was trying to cheat me out of my inheritance and the house. I also had witnesses lined up, some friends who knew about her behavior, and the private investigator who confirmed her ongoing affair with Mark. I knew she'd try to spin things, to make herself look innocent, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Sarah showed up looking bitchy and defiant, trying to project that poor victim vibe. She brought her lawyer, who looked confident, maybe even a little smug. I could see her scheming, trying to manipulate the judge, but I stayed calm. I knew her game. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out. How she'd been secretly planning to claim half my inheritance, how she'd been lying about her affair, and how she'd tried to transfer money illegally. I presented every piece of evidence I had, making sure the court saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, dishonest woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted. Sarah's lawyer tried to argue that I was unstable, that I'd been emotionally abusive, trying to paint me as the bad guy. But I countered with facts, with her own words and with the evidence I'd collected. I also brought up her attempt to transfer funds secretly, which was illegal. I could see the judge was listening, weighing the facts. It was a tense moment, but I felt confident. I knew I had the truth on my side. In the end, the judge granted my request for a temporary order to freeze our assets and prevent her from selling or transferring the house until the case was fully resolved. That was a huge win. It bought me some time to prepare my case and to make sure she couldn't just walk away with everything. I left the courtroom feeling exhausted but victorious, at least for now. I knew this wasn't over and she'd probably come back swinging, but I was ready. That night, I sat alone in my house, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I'd lost a lot of trust and I was angry and hurt, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been blind for too long, trusting her, believing her lies, thinking she loved me. Now I saw her for what she was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd been willing to destroy everything we built for her own benefit. I knew I had to keep fighting, to protect what was mine, no matter how dirty the fight got. I'd spent years working for that inheritance and that house, and I wasn't about to let her take it all away just because she wanted to feel powerful and in control. The coming weeks would be even messier, I knew that. But I was determined to see this through, to stand my ground and come out the other side with what was rightfully mine. I'd learned a hard lesson about trust, betrayal, and the importance of standing up for myself. And I knew that no matter what happened, I'd never let her manipulate me again. This was about more than money. It was about dignity, respect, and reclaiming what was mine. In the weeks that followed, everything seemed to spiral even further out of control. Sarah, true to her manipulative nature, didn't take the court's decision lightly. She tried to push back, filing her own motions, claiming I was harassing her and trying to ruin her reputation. She even attempted to turn friends and family against me, spinning tales of how I was abusive and controlling, trying to paint herself as the victim once again. But I had my evidence, my witnesses, and the truth on my side. I stayed calm, focused, and made sure every move I made was about protecting what I worked so hard for. The legal battle dragged on, but I refused to back down. I knew Sarah's game. She was trying to wear me out, drain my resources, and force a settlement that would favor her. But I was prepared for that. I hired a top lawyer who specialized in asset protection, and we worked tirelessly to solidify my claims. I also made sure my financial records were airtight, so there was no way she could claim I was hiding assets or being dishonest. Every day was a new challenge, a new attempt on her part to manipulate the system, but I refused to let her win. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, more than I'd ever felt in my life. But in the midst of all this chaos, I also found clarity. I realized that I'd been giving her too much benefit of the doubt for too long. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her constant manipulation, they all showed me who she really was. I'd been blind, clinging to the hope that she'd change, that our love was worth fighting for. But now I saw that she'd never truly loved me. She just loved what I could give her. Finally, after months of legal battles, court hearings, and sleepless nights, the judge ruled in my favor. Sarah was ordered to relinquish her claims to the house and my inheritance. The court also awarded me full control of our assets, and she was required to pay back some of the money she'd illegally transferred. It was a hard-fought victory, but it felt like a huge weight had been lifted. I could finally breathe again, knowing I'd protected what I'd earned and that I'd stood up for myself. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this ordeal. Trusting blindly can destroy you, and sometimes you have to fight for what's right, no matter how dirty the fight gets. I also learned that some people will do anything to get what they want, even if it means tearing you apart. But I also found strength I didn't know I had, and I'm proud of how I handled everything. I came out of this mess more cautious, more aware, and more determined to never let someone manipulate me again. To anyone going through something similar, don't ignore the signs, don't let guilt or love cloud your judgment, and never underestimate the power of standing your ground. Protect yourself, gather your evidence, and fight for what's yours. Because in the end, the truth will set you free if you're willing to fight for it.